It all started with a leak, just a single line buried deep in a secret telegram, but it was enough to shake an entire continent. Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, had just 2 days to hand over 70% of the country's gold reserves. Otherwise, the country would have to immediately pay the entire debt and interest, amounting to $5.6 billion. And the name at the bottom of the telegram, Donald J. Trump. At the time, he was the President of the United States, the most powerful voice in the Group of Seven, and the International Monetary Fund, IMF. But this was more than just a political move. He was using his absolute power to launch a global economic attack under the guise of behind-the-scenes diplomacy. The demand shocked not only Washington but also the neutral nations of the G7 and the 19 countries of the IMF system. No negotiation, no concessions, just a cold ultimatum. Pay the debt or surrender half of Burkina Faso's newly mined gold. This was not a negotiation. This was a threat aimed straight at the heart of Ouagadougou and the Burkina Faso government. And before we dive into the story, don't forget to subscribe to continue discovering hot content like this. According to sources, the classified cable did not simply appear out of nowhere. It was delivered by hand through an absolutely trusted intermediary. Representing the G7 at that moment was Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni alongside Kristalina Georgieva, the Bulgarian-born managing director of the IMF. Early in the morning, exactly 6:30 a.m. on the 12th of August 2025, the cable was placed on the desk of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The message was sharp and unmistakable. Either allow corporations from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France and Germany backed by the IMF, to immediately begin mining and exporting 70% of the gold, or pay $5.66 billion owed to G7 nations plus the IMF debt of $324 million SDR. Total debt, $5.66 billion. The deadline, 48 hours to decide. Refuse and be prepared to face sanctions, resource blockades, and engineered internal destabilization. This was not diplomacy. This was a bare-faced act of extortion. The tone of the message, believed to be from Donald Trump, was as cold and rigid as steel. We saved you from terrorism. We fed you when you were starving. We lent you money. Now it's time to pay your debts or pay the price. But Trump miscalculated. The most powerful man in Burkina Faso was not one to be cowed. Traoré did not flinch. He immediately summoned key political leaders, senior military commanders, and the most trusted mining executives. In the meeting, he made his position crystal clear. Tell the G7 and the IMF, Burkina Faso is not for sale. Within hours, the story exploded. From Lagos to Kinshasa, African media ran bold headlines. The West demands Africa's resources. Traoré given 2-day ultimatum. The world began to watch. But Traoré did not respond with pen and paper. He answered with strategy and resolve. 4 months, a massive secret had been hidden beneath the sun-scorched plains of northern Burkina Faso. Not rumor, not speculation, but fact. A colossal deposit of untapped mineral wealth, confirmed by a covert geological task force established by Traoré shortly after taking power. The data had been fully encrypted by North Korean tech specialists. Everything was sealed until the first drill bit hit the ground. Then the eyes of the West, specifically the US and France, spotted it. Surveillance satellites over the Sahel began picking up unusual activity. Within just 2 days, US intelligence had detected strange energy signatures, traced shipments of equipment from Iran and Venezuela. And soon after, the signals of gold lit up on their screens. By that time, Burkina Faso had reclaimed control of its gold mines from Western corporate hands, quietly expelling G7-backed contractors from its territory. French and American-controlled companies were being replaced by national military units. The revenue no longer flowed to Paris. It was now redirected into a domestic development fund. The G7 and the IMF knew exactly what that meant. Here was a nation rich in gold, not managed by Wall Street, not answering to Paris, not bowing to the G7, but backed by its own people, its own army, and its own vision. This was not just defiance. It was a blueprint, and it terrified them. They did not just want the gold. They wanted to kill the idea itself before another African nation dared to follow. Then the phone calls began from power brokers across the West, all asking the same question. How do we stop this before it becomes another Libya, except African-owned? Their answer, use the West's influence. Use Trump's blunt force. Make Traoré kneel. But the man they chose did not kneel. When the message reached Ouagadougou, it carried no trace of diplomacy. It was wrapped in arrogance, the language of empire disguised as business. The G7 delivered it as if it were a business proposal. But make no mistake, this was not negotiation. It was extortion. The demands were listed in a document marked Debt Recovery Strategy Framework. Its content was anything but subtle. 70% of Burkina Faso's gold production was to be handed over to U.S. mining giants and IMF-appointed managers under the label gradual debt repayment. Control of all major gold export routes was to be transferred to U.S.-approved intermediaries. An American advisory board would oversee all new mining contracts and revenue distribution. And in exchange, promises of military security cooperation, technology partnerships, and protection from regime change. Yes, protection from regime change, a threat thinly veiled in polite words. The message was crystal clear. Pay us or pay the price. At the top of the document, in thick red ink, was a handwritten note. Traoré has 48 hours. This was not just economic colonialism. It was imperialism 4.0, brazen, naked, and direct. Among the 19 IMF member nations, the so-called neutral elite tried to appear calm. They claimed Trump was acting on his own, not as official IMF policy. But behind closed doors, no one stopped him. Because deep down, Trump was only saying aloud what they had been thinking for years. We do not care who runs Africa as long as we control what is under the ground. Captain Ibrahim Traoré understood the message perfectly, and he had already made his decision. No foreign power will dictate the future of our land. If this was going to be a power game, Traoré was ready, but not as a pawn. He stepped forward as a leader, a sovereign man representing a sovereign nation. And Trump? He had just threatened the wrong soldier. When the ultimatum landed in Burkina Faso's war room, Traoré did not flinch. He read the letter calmly twice. Then he set it aside, stood up, and said flatly, "So this is how they collected debt. Poison in a suit and tie." He did not wait. He did not hesitate. He lit a fire. They wanted 70% of our future. They would get 100% of our resistance. He did not call the G7. He did not call the IMF. He called the commander of the Special Sovereignty Force, a covert military unit created for exactly this moment. Orders were issued fast. Lock down every oil field. Double security on all gold convoys. Cut off all data flows to foreign contractors. Prepare the national broadcast. The statement was coming. By noon, the entire country was watching. The screen went black. Then a live feed appeared. No lavish studio. No flashy production. Just Traoré in uniform. One hand on the Burkinabe flag. The other holding a folder stamped Burkina Faso. 48 hours to repay debt. His voice was steady. His gaze razor sharp. To the people of Burkina Faso and to our brothers and sisters across Africa, they are not just demanding debt payments from us. Nor are they simply demanding 70% of our gold. What they truly seek is the fear within us. He stopped speaking. The whole room went silent. To those behind this insult, to Mr. Trump and his supporters, you have underestimated us. We are not Libya. We are not Iraq. We are not your playground. We will never surrender our land to repay debts you have imposed. We will never bow to your weapons or your banks. You gave us 2 days. Here is our answer. Now you have 2 days to take your greed, your threats, and your arrogance and leave African soil. He stood up, saluted, and walked off the screen. No questions, no deals, no surrender. But while Traoré's speech set off cheers across Africa, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, another kind of storm was quietly forming. In oil company boardrooms and intelligence offices, panic spread. At ExxonMobil, emergency calls went out to Washington. At Halliburton, teams worked quickly to measure the damage. And at CIA headquarters in Langley, alarms went off. Traoré hadn't given in. He had spoken out in public, and that was the real problem. If Burkina Faso could say no and still win, what would stop Mali, Niger, Chad, or Congo from doing the same? The pressure increased fast. CIA agents started appearing more often in West Africa. Drones flew more missions over Burkina Faso's gold routes. On social media, smear campaigns began to spread, calling Traoré unstable, reckless, even crazy. Near the Ghana border, private military contractors tied to a known intelligence company were seen moving in. The message from Washington was clear. This must end now. But Traoré's message had already been heard across Africa. Africa is not for sale. The plan against him was simple. Create trouble from inside his country. At the same time, big Western news networks all started telling the same story. Burkina Faso was refusing to pay its debts. Experts warned. They said Traoré is leading his country into disaster. But inside Burkina Faso, the truth was very different. More people were signing up to guard the gold mines. The resistance was not just military. It was cultural and community-driven, and it was growing every hour. University students held events about sovereignty and fair use of resources. Women's groups brought food and supplies to soldiers protecting the mines. And every time CNN or Fox News attacked, young people didn't get angry, they laughed. Then they reposted the news clip with one line: "If they hate him this much, he must be doing something right." Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew the truth. The real enemy wasn't only Trump. It was the whole system. Banks, oil companies, the G7, the IMF, and the old colonial powers that had taken from Africa for generations. Now, that system was attacking one man because he dared to do something no one expected. He said no. And he meant it. Burkina Faso was under attack politically, economically, digitally. But Traoré was not alone. Just days after openly rejecting the ultimatum from Trump and the IMF, 3 military planes landed in Ouagadougou. No bombs, no weapons, only brothers. From Mali came Colonel Assimi Goïta, calm and steady. From Niger came General Abdourahmane Tidiane, eyes burning with determination. From Guinea came Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, walking tall, unapologetic. They entered the presidential palace together. When they came out, they stood side by side with Traoré for the whole world to see. Then came the words that shook the continent. "If you touch Burkina Faso, you touch all of us." This wasn't just a statement. It was a new doctrine. Africa's answer to NATO. The ES shield. Mali sent experienced military advisors to guard the gold mines. Niger deployed logistics teams skilled in desert terrain. Guinea opened its airspace for emergency supply flights. The fight wasn't only on the ground. It moved online. ES-backed media launched a massive counteroffensive, exposing Western disinformation, revealing the truth behind the resource war, filling social media with one unified message: our resources, our future, our fight. The impact spread quickly. In Bamako, crowds filled the streets to show support for Traoré. In Conakry, murals appeared showing him standing on oil barrels holding the Burkina Faso flag high. Even in Chad and the Central African Republic, youth groups chanted "AS or death." In the West, intelligence agencies scrambled to respond. But they missed one important point. This was no longer just about Burkina Faso. This was a Pan-African firewall. And Traoré wasn't backing down. He was moving forward, supported by a brotherhood built not from treaties, but from war, betrayal, and a shared dream of real African freedom. While Western powers grew angry and panicked behind closed doors, 2 global giants made their move quietly, strategically, without apology. China and Russia. They didn't arrive with threats or arrogance. They brought something much stronger. Support, technology, and a message Captain Traoré would never forget. You are not alone. Just 12 hours after Trump's ultimatum hit the news, a discreet Chinese delegation landed in Ouagadougou. No cameras, no fanfare, just engineers, diplomats, and a game-changing proposal. A fully operational gold mining facility designed and built in 90 days. A gold valuation system that bypassed Western banks entirely, and most importantly, a digital trade platform using China's digital yuan, cutting out both the CFA franc and the US dollar. Burkina Faso would not only own its gold, it would control every step of the value chain. Russia followed immediately after. The next day, a Russian Ilyushin military jet landed on a secure airstrip. On board, advanced electronic warfare systems and dozens of unmarked crates labeled special defense assets. In other words, Burkina Faso's gold mines were now protected by Russian-grade anti-drone defenses. Washington was stunned. CNN called it a dangerous new alliance. The US State Department accused Traoré of selling out to dictatorships. But in Africa, no one cared what the West thought. To the people, Traoré wasn't bowing. He was fighting back. To them, China and Russia weren't invaders. They were tools. And yes, that was the future. A future free from colonial chains. By this point, Traoré had achieved what many thought impossible. He rejected a US ultimatum. He exposed a global resource grab, and he brought China, Russia, and half of West Africa to his side. In the US, the media went into full panic mode. CNN flashed its red headline, "Burkina Faso refuses to pay dirty debt." Fox News went into panic mode. Traoré must be stopped. Talk shows filled up with guests, IMF-linked bank CEOs, retired generals, all repeating the same word, dangerous. They called him crazy, a dictator, Putin's puppet, the next Gaddafi. But the internet wasn't buying it. African content creators flooded YouTube and Instagram with videos praising his courage. Even African Americans joined in. This man told Trump, "Over my dead body," and lived to tell the story. That's leadership. Pay attention. In Burkina Faso, young people fought back in their own way. They took CNN's fear-filled clips and remixed them into protest songs. They wore t-shirts that read, "If CNN hates you, you must be doing something right." Traoré was no longer just a president. He had become a symbol, a viral figure, a movement. Even Time magazine took notice. Their next digital cover read, "The man the West can't bully, inside Traoré's African uprising." But fame came with risk. The more headlines carried his name, the more threats began to pile up. Private intelligence firms launched cyber attacks. Social media bots pushed fake scandals and smear campaigns. In Washington's closed-door meetings, the old whispers returned, accusations of debt dodging. But none of it mattered. The people saw exactly what was going on. And Traoré, he had broken the script. He wasn't supposed to fight back. He wasn't supposed to survive. And he definitely wasn't supposed to go viral. Yet here he was, a 35-year-old soldier from Ouagadougou, more famous than most Western presidents. No PR team, no billionaire backers, just truth, courage, and gold. Time was running out. The whole world watched. Would Traoré agree to hand over 70% of Burkina Faso's gold to pay down the debt? Instead, when the two-day deadline expired, Traoré made his boldest move yet. At dawn, Burkina Faso's National Assembly held an emergency session, completely hidden from outside eyes. Behind closed doors, under Traoré's direct orders, they passed a historic resolution. All gold reserves within Burkina Faso are hereby nationalized and permanently protected from all forms of foreign corporate ownership. The ink had barely dried. The decree was in force. And by sunrise, every Western company still operating on Burkinabe soil received the same message. Pack your bags. Your game here is over. Licenses held by French and Canadian mining firms, revoked. A G7 and IMF-backed energy survey team, escorted to the border. Foreign diplomats informed in plain words, Burkina Faso's resources are not a bargaining chip for debt repayment. Then Traoré appeared on national television. No uniform, no weapons, dressed only in traditional Burkinabe attire. Traoré spoke with a steady, clear, and unwavering voice. We've been exploited for generations. Now that we've discovered our wealth, they want to take it away again. But I am not here to serve empires. I am here to serve my people, a people who have suffered far too long. He paused for a long moment. Then came the line that echoed from radios to rooftops. Burkina Faso is not afraid, and I will not negotiate with thieves. Outside, the streets erupted. Drums pounded. Fireworks lit the sky. Crowds danced and chanted through the capital. He said no. He said no. He said no. Online, the movement caught fire again. Young Africans posted videos holding soil or coins and whispered one phrase, "We protect what's ours." The IMF's ultimatum expired. The threat had failed. And Traoré, he didn't just survive the pressure. He rewrote the rules. 2 days after his bold challenge, the G7 and IMF went silent. No press briefings, no tweets, just quiet panic behind closed doors. There were nervous whispers in military offices. Real alarm bells rang in oil boardrooms. Then, at exactly 7:42 a.m. Eastern Time, Donald J. Trump broke the silence. With an all-caps tweet, Traoré just made the biggest mistake of his life. Africa will pay for this. The internet exploded. Journalists scrambled for reactions. Cable news turned into shouting matches. Markets in New York dipped as investors braced for the worst. But in Ouagadougou, Captain Traoré didn't flinch. When aides showed him the tweet, he reportedly smiled and said, "That's the sound of an empire losing control." Still, the threat was real. Satellite activity over West Africa tripled. The U.S. Navy quietly moved 2 warships closer to the Gulf of Guinea. AFRICOM issued a discreet warning about rising instability. Burkina Faso's military acted fast. Anti-air defense went live. Gold transport routes were sealed off. IS allies moved instantly. Mali sent armored units to the border. Niger activated air defense radar to monitor shared skies. Guinea announced a joint rapid response pact, promising immediate retaliation against any foreign attack on Burkina Faso. Then came the shock that stunned the world. This was no longer just about governments. Ordinary people across Africa rose up. In Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and Senegal, thousands gathered outside U.S. embassies. These weren't ordinary protests. They were warnings. Signs read, "Touch Traoré and you touch all of us. Africa is not your minefield. Keep your democracy. We'll keep our dignity." In Washington, Trump was reportedly furious that his pressure campaign had failed. But the final blow didn't come from any government. It came from a video just 43 seconds long, by Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself. It went global within hours. Looking straight into the camera, calm and steady, he said, "This is not just about debt. This is not just about gold. This is about the soul of Africa. And I would rather die standing than live kneeling." Within 12 hours, the video had been shared over 12 million times. Former African presidents began speaking out, breaking years of silence. One by one, they called Traoré the beginning of a new era, a new kind of leader. The world held its breath. But for Africa, it was the first deep breath of freedom in a very, very long time.